Concerns about looming legislation in the case of Greenlandic women receiving involuntary contraceptives and continued fallout from Mette Frederiksen's reaction to the migrant crossings in Ceuta. It's week 33. I'm Amos Miller and this is the Danish Press Review. On Friday, the Folketing will take its first steps in passing a law long in the making. Restitution for Greenlandic women who between 1960 and 1991 unknowingly received contraceptive implants. But the speed and timing of the bill are raising concerns among multiple stakeholders. On the front page of Wednesday's Information, Ulrik Dahlen details the history of the case and what the legislation aims to rectify. Greenlandic forced contraceptive implant victims will now get compensation. On August 14th, the Folketing will begin the legislative process on a massive bill aimed at providing restitution for Greenlandic women who were forcibly and unknowingly implanted with contraceptive intrauterine devices, or IUDs. The law sets aside 1.6 billion krona in order to pay out 300,000 krona per case. In 1953, following the ratification of Denmark's current Grundlov, or constitution, Greenland officially changed from being a colony to part of the Danish kingdom. This led to urbanization and a growing population. In response, Denmark instituted a contraceptive program, which saw the average number of children fall from 7 children per Greenlandic woman to 2.4. But the costs for the Greenlandic women, often underage girls, was huge. Guilt and shame, pelvic diseases, and involuntary childlessness were some of the hardships which followed from the Danish-initiated campaign. The case has been a major strain between Denmark and Greenland, and it led to a public apology from Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen last fall. Frederiksen speaking in Nuuk. We know that there are other dark chapters of systemic discrimination of Greenlanders because they were Greenlanders. My apology on Denmark's behalf is also apology for those other failures that Denmark is responsible for, where Greenlanders were systematically handled differently and worse than other citizens in the kingdom. The expected law will come into force on September 1st, at which point affected Greenlandic women will have 2 years to apply for restitution. The government will also send informational representatives to major Greenlandic cities to spread information about the law and how to apply for restitution. The exact number of women who were affected is unknown. In 1964, the top Danish doctor in Greenland estimated that around 4,500 women had received an IUD. This leads Mads Premming, a lawyer who has represented many Greenlandic women in this case, to guess the total number of victims in the contraceptive campaign is in any case much higher, maybe up to 10,000 Greenlandic women all in all. As you can imagine, the law still faces some critiques. Naya H. Nathanielsen, Greenlandic member of the Folketing from the Inuit Ataqatigiit party, is concerned about the pressure placed on the victims to self-report and file their cases in order to receive restitution. The bill suggests that it's the individual woman's fight if they receive a refusal in their case. But there is talk of systemic overreach, while the lack of administrative recourse will become a problem for vulnerable women. There's also more than just concern about the process laid out in the bill. From Wednesday's Berlingske, there also comes concern about the process of lawmaking for the bill. Top lawyer wants his report on the IUD case out in the light. Jonas Christoffersen, a lawyer and former director for the Institute for Human Rights, was one of 4 experts tasked in writing a report about the IUD case for the Greenlandic Parliament and the Folketing. The report was delivered to the Greenlandic Parliament half a year ago, but has yet to be released. Christoffersen believes the report should be made public and available to the Folketing before the current legislation continues. The Folketing is well within its rights to enact any legislation they see fit when they have the political opportunity. But the Folketing and the public ought, I believe, to know what independent experts have concluded about the case, which is now illuminated from every conceivable angle. Christoffersen, along with researchers from Alaska, New Zealand, and another from Denmark, set out to document the full scope of the IUD case, but along the way, disagreement led to the group splitting and writing 2 reports. Alongside the split, the requirement for the report is that they be translated into 3 languages: Danish, Greenlandic, and English. 2 extensive reports alongside translation of both is partially to blame for the speed of the release. Christoffersen is concerned that the Folketing will have to return to amend the law after passage once the reports are released, a problem he says could be avoided either with a delay in the lawmaking process or via release of the reports. I can't understand why the Folketing is in such a hurry to pass this law. The legislative process ought to pause until they've got an overview over what the in and outs of this case are, seen in the light of both Danish and international law. Meanwhile, Mette Frederiksen, responsible for children, youth, justice, and equality in the Greenlandic parliament, and Ida Auken, health minister for the Danish government, offer competing excuses. Frederiksen notes that the translation process is important for equal access to the content for native Greenlandic speakers. Auken points out that the law is a high priority of the current government and that the release of the reports are, of course, the purview of the Greenlandic government. The outcome from the release of the reports could be incredibly consequential. Depending on their determinations, Denmark could be considered responsible for genocide in the case, which could lead the country being brought before the ICC based on the UN's 1948 Genocide Convention. In a continuation of last week's primary topic, an opinion piece in Børsen calls out Mette Frederiksen's reaction to the migrant crossings in Ceuta. Ceuta shows that Denmark isn't ready for a bigger role in European politics. Marlene Vind, political science professor at Copenhagen University and leader of the Center for European Politics there, believes that the Prime Minister's rush to action shows a lack of judgment. It also showed that Europe, while being an economic giant, is still a political paper tiger. The episode displayed, according to many, not only Europe's vulnerability, but unfortunately how weak, divided, and panicked we act when various external forces press us. We ought to be smarter. Vind points out that the chief critic of Spain, and Frederiksen's political ally, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, has seen more illegal border crossings under her watch than in Sanchez's Spain in the last year, noting, "Here comes Meloni's many legalization programs, where hundreds of thousands on her watch were made legal due to a labor shortage. These are major reasons to criticize Meloni over Sanchez, even though the right-wing nationalist Meloni, and not Sanchez, is best friends with the social democratic Mette Frederiksen." Vind concludes, "If we wish, as a little country, to play the muscle in international and European politics, we ought to begin with thinking before we act." That's it for week 33. See you next week.